Hello, and welcome to Chapter 17, Part 2, as we continue to examine the works of Michelangelo Buonarroti. Let's continue on and look at his ceiling painting of the Sistine Chapel located in Rome, Italy. You'll recall that Michelangelo was in Florence working on a mural in the Palazzo Vecchio across the way from Leonardo da Vinci, and then he was called to Rome. He was called to Rome to begin work on a project that he had a lot of desire to do, and that was the tomb for Pope Julius II. And so he went away to pick out marble for the tomb in Carrara, where then the Pope decided that he wanted Michelangelo to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which was built by his uncle, Pope Sixtus. And so he summons Michelangelo back to Rome in the midst of this tomb project. And Michelangelo balks at this. He did not consider himself to be a painter. He claimed that he was a sculptor and not a painter. And so they argued back and forth for a while, and eventually he relented. Uh, but in the midst of that, Michelangelo runs away and hides from the Pope, and the Pope comes and finds him, and they discuss what the subject ought to be for that ceiling. The Pope offers that it should be scenes of the 12 disciples, and Michelangelo counters that it should actually be scenes dealing with the book of Genesis, which is what's in the middle that you see right down the center. And then around the center panels, Michelangelo adds different sibyls and prophets and seers that all predicted the coming of Jesus. So, in addition to those scenes, all of the architecture that you see, all of those stone borders and so forth, that's all painted. The ceiling is completely flat, but all of those little stone borders that you see were painted by Michelangelo, and he did most of the work himself. He had an assistant that helped him prepare the ceiling. It's all done in fresco work, and over the centuries became quite tarnished and covered with soot from candles below and pollution and people's breath and so forth. There was an extensive restoration begun in 1980 and completed in 1994, which was funded by the Japanese television company Nippon. In return for that, they had exclusive television rights to record the restoration of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And when it was first revealed, it was quite shocking because the colors were quite a bit different from what everyone had been used to for the last 500 years. So we'll take a look at that, and I'll show you a few comparisons of before and after shots. Now, this is a view of what everyone was used to seeing of the ceiling before the restoration, before it was cleaned. And you'll see it has sort of a brown overcoating. And it's not bad. It kind of links everything together and gives it a sort of cohesion. But as you'll see in the next slide, the colors are much more vibrant once the cleaning took place. And then in this slide, you can see just exactly how vibrant and deep all of the colors are, very bright blues, reds, greens, and so forth. And again, quite shocking to the public when it was first revealed. Remember when we looked at the Donny Tondo and all of those vibrant colors there? That should have been an indicator of Michelangelo's original intent of what the ceiling should have looked like. But again, and it's quite it's quite impactful when you stand underneath it. I got to see it after it was restored, and it indeed is quite overwhelming when you stand underneath it and consider that a single man painted all this in just about 5 years, single-handedly. It's quite the undertaking, and considered to be the masterpiece of high Renaissance art. So this is a closer view. We're gradually getting more and more details of those center scenes. The figure in purple that we see there, that's God, and he appears over and over. He's here, he's here. These are all creation scenes, the book of Genesis, and scenes of creation. So naturally, we'll see the figure of God appear over and over. On the first day, he created the heavens and the earth. And the second day, he separated the light from the darkness, and so on and so forth. The great flood, the creation of man, all of those images are recorded right down the center path there. That's where we find the creation of the world. And this slide is just a little diagram that shows you what each scene is. If you want to hold it up next to an image of the whole ceiling, you can see exactly what's what and kind of trace it back and see how they all match up. It's pretty fun. This, of course, is the most famous scene from the ceiling paintings, the creation of Adam. This is not the physical molding of a man at the hands of a divine sculptor, which is an image that we might expect to see from Michelangelo, who is a sculptor himself, but it's more the giving of the spark of life to the very first man. Adam is a new creature. He's lying there as if he's recently been awakened from a deep sleep. He's very languid. He can barely hold his hand up. His head is kind of tilted as if he's just barely got enough energy to pay attention to God, which is in great contrast to that great swirling energy of God's maroon cape and that tumbling crowd of accompanying figures like Eve and all of the cherubs and accompanying angels. The landscape that Adam lies on is given minimal treatment, as is Michelangelo's habit. Remember, he hated painting landscapes. Uh, his focus is on the titanic portrayals of beauty in God's creation, and he likes to focus on the uh, beauty of God's creation in the form of man. Uh, if we look at the overall image of God and his swirling cape, there is a theory that that is supposed to be an image of the human brain, or at least a symbolic kind of metaphor for the human brain. And in this image, with a side by side comparison, you can see if we overlay a contour line drawing of an actual brain, they do kind of line up. Uh, Michelangelo would have been familiar with what a brain looks like, having done human dissections as part of his training as an artist. Would he have been astute enough and advanced enough to make such a deep metaphor? And what would it mean to compare God to a human brain? The most obvious connection would be that God is a construct of the human brain. Man made God, man manufactured God, instead of the other way around. So that would be the most obvious comment. Or you could interpret it a couple of other ways. Uh, God causes man to ponder himself and ponder God. God allows man to be creative with his thoughts and that sort of thing. But the most obvious connection is that God was created by man through his own thoughts. Anyway, that's one theory. It's not been proven one way or the other. and Michelangelo never wrote anything along those lines to confirm that theory. This image is probably one of the most parodied in all of the history of art. This one, of course, is Jim Henson, the creator of the Muppets and all of his creations. And then, of course, he's giving the spark of life to his most famous creation, Kermit the Frog, here in the role of Adam. I wanted to show you a closer view of the hands of God and Adam to let you know that these images really aren't all that detailed. Michelangelo was aware that they would only be seen from the floor, so 68 feet away, and you wouldn't see all the tiny, tiny details. So he painted just enough to where it would look correct from the floor. So there's no tiny little details, and he paints everything so that it will look accurate from the perspective of the floor. This is a preparatory study for the figure of Adam, and you can see that they reveal Michelangelo's keen attention to subtle details of human anatomy, and also his use of the chiaroscuro that we also saw used by Leonardo in his drawing techniques. Quite different from previous methods of drawing where we just outline the figure and then fill it in. Here, the every muscle, every tendon, every sinew just builds up very gradually, very subtly, in order to capture every nuance of the human form. His process for drawing off the scenes in the ceiling was pretty incredible. He drew full scale cartoons, not like Mickey Mouse, but just drawings on paper. And then everywhere that you see a contour line, he would poke little holes all along those lines. And I can't get my drawer to draw the little holes. So hold on a second. There we go. Little hole, little hole, little hole. And then he would get a pouncer, which was a little bag of charcoal dust, and he would tap it along those holes once it was pressed up against the ceiling. And then when you take the paper away, you get a transferal of the drawing in the form of little dots of charcoal. So it's kind of a long, tedious process. Some cartoons from the Renaissance have survived, but not from the Sistine Chapel. We have some of Raphael's cartoons that have made it down to us, but most of the time these were ephemera. They were just thrown away and not saved. So this is an unusual view. This is God separating the light from the darkness. You can see the light in the center there. God very strongly and aggressively commanding the light to be coming into being. But the other thing that kind of stands out to us that's unusual, and I can't recall another place in art where it's depicted, it's God's derriere. And the toga is very clingy there on God's buttocks. And so we might ask ourselves, why, Michelangelo? Why did you paint God's clingy buttocks that way? There are two prevailing theories about this. One is that this was kind of a protest to the Pope. Since Michelangelo was basically forced to paint this ceiling, this was kind of a mild protest, his way of saying, yeah, I'll do this, but I'm going to have a little fun with it. And if you don't like it, you can get someone else to come up here and do this, or I won't do it at all. So he puts in little jokes every now and then in his paintings, including if you make him mad or if you have arguments with him, as we'll see down the road, he'll paint your portrait in an unflattering way. The other theory behind this is that it's a reference to an incident in the book of Exodus, I believe, where Moses asks God to show himself to him. He wants to see what God looks like. And God says, no, if you looked at my face, you would die. And so here's what I'll do. I'll put you in this little cave and I'll cover it with my hand. And then after I walk by, you can stick your head out and look at me and you'll see the back of me or you'll see my hind parts. And so he does, and then walks past and takes his hand away. Moses sticks his head out and sees God's hinder. And so maybe that's what that means. There's the bottoms of his feet and his butt, and he's walking away. It's just a really strange image, not something, not a way that we would expect to see God portrayed. Another interesting thing about the Sistine Chapel ceiling is exactly how Michelangelo painted that ceiling. If you've seen movies and cartoons over the years, usually Michelangelo is lying on his back on a big scaffolding while he does it, and that makes sense. That would be the most comfortable way to do it. But Michelangelo actually records how he did it. He stood on top of a big ladder and craned his arched his back backwards, as you can see in this drawing, and painted it that way. This was a poem that he wrote about how painful it was to actually have to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and then he added a little sketch to show how he had to paint it. So it was quite the ordeal. He had custom scaffolding built inside of the Sistine Chapel and then had to have it moved every few days. Each of the panels took a different amount of time. Some of them he could complete in a day, and then others would take several months to complete. It just depended on his mood at the time. So interesting how he actually accomplished this. I've always liked this slide. This is the ceiling halfway through the cleaning. You can see the before at the top and the after at the bottom as they move that scaffolding along and take care of everything. Not only did they remove all the grime from the ceiling, but they repaired the plaster as they went along. Little bits of it had cracked and fallen off, and so they filled in cracks and made repairs as they went along and fixed the ceiling up. They were very careful in how they cleaned the ceiling, and this is just a little bit of the process. First, they would put a very mild cleaning solution over it, brushed very delicately, and then they would put layers of rice paper over that and let it dry a bit, and then pull it off. And when the paper came off, it would take some of the grime with it. And then they would repeat that process until the area was clean, followed by a very mild kind of wiping down with a sponge. And so you start with this sort of image, and then you end up with this type of image. So quite painstaking and laborious, but the results are pretty keen. Here's another before and after. This is the temptation in the Garden of Eden right before they get expelled. You can see Satan on the right as a snake giving the fruit from the tree of knowledge to Eve. And Adam is also kind of reaching up there to get his own fruit. This was a sort of a controversial issue back in the day because Eve's face is so close to Adam's genitals there. It was a little shocking. In addition to the difference between the grimy version and the clean version, I'd like you to notice how muscular Eve is. This goes back to how Michelangelo likes to portray the human body. He likes to portray it in a state of perfection. And for him, that's seeing every muscle and every tendon and every sinew. And the best way to see that is to show it in a state of flex. So once again, it doesn't matter if you're old, young, male, or female. We poke those muscles out as much as we can and put them in a state of flex and stress so that you can see them at their bulgiest. And then here is a similar effect with the creation of Eve. You'll remember that Eve was created from one of Adam's ribs. The landscape is minimal, of course, because Michelangelo does not enjoy painting landscapes. And again, Eve is very muscular, with a traditionally sort of masculine physique. Another explanation for that may be because he used, it's possible he used all male models, even for female figures. And so he's using a male muscular model even when he paints female figures. I don't have a confirmation of that, but that's one theory as to the appearance of some of his female figures. And then here is the rest of the image of the fall of man and the expulsion from the Garden of Eden. Previous images of the expulsion and the uh, fall of man had been painted separately, but Michelangelo combines them into a continuous narrative with the fall of man or the temptation of man on the left, and then the expulsion on the right. Satan and the banishing angel almost function as branches of the same tree, and yet Michelangelo links them all together. And once again, the landscape, especially on the right, is just a single line with atmospheric perspective in the background. This is a restored view of one of the prophets and sibyls. This is his painting of the prophet Isaiah. And you can see also uh, Michelangelo is employing a little bit of that painting technique, an older painting technique called cangiantismo. And you can see it in some of the wrinkles here where we use the opposite color to show wrinkles and folds and drapery. So the garment is pink, but some of the folds are like a lighter blue or a hint of lighter blue. And we see that in a few other figures as well. The garment may be blue, but some of the highlights are maybe a pinkish color, something like that. Also, there's not a lot of detail, especially you can see that in the hair, a lot of contour lines and suggestions because he knew that this would only be seen from the ground. Beloved illustrator Norman Rockwell also used Michelangelo's image of the prophet Isaiah as a model for his image of Rosie the Riveter from his cover painting for the Saturday Evening Post from 1942, as you can see here. This is an image of the Cumaean Sibyl before and after the restoration. The story behind this, she was another prophet that foretold the coming of Christ. She was a very attractive prophet in her youth, and Apollo sought to seduce her, but she was also very crafty, and so she bargained with Apollo and asked him. She agreed to the seduction or agreed to sleep with him in exchange for immortality, and he agreed. But then, when it came time to consummate the deal, she backed out of it. But he had already agreed, and as a god, he was bound to his word. So he said, I'll grant you the immortality, but you will always look your age. So in this case, the fact that she has the Arnold Schwarzenegger gun show going on here, it has these bowed up arms and all that musculature, but still has the wrinkled old lady face. Kind of supports that story of where she came from and her origins and that kind of thing. I thought that was kind of an interesting take on the story. Again, it doesn't matter if you're old or young, male or female. or even if you're a little cherub, you still get massive biceps and triceps and all sorts of muscles. Once he completed the Sistine Chapel ceiling, Michelangelo worked on a number of other projects, and then the Pope summoned him back to Rome and had him paint the wall over the altar and painted a Last Judgment scene. Michelangelo was 66 years old. When he began this, it took him about 8 years. And this particular painting, some say, marks the end of the High Renaissance and the beginning of Mannerist painting. It's still very much a Michelangelo painting. It's a painting with a lot of power and raw energy, a lot of writhing nude figures, which is very much a feature of both Mannerist painting and Michelangelo. It's divided into three horizontal rows. The top row is heaven, which is this row here. And then we have angels above that in these two little lunettes, and they all hold the instruments of Christ's passion. And those instruments would be objects that were related to the crucifixion, like the crown of thorns and the cross and the post of flagellation and the spear that pierced his side and so forth. The next is the realm of the saved, which has various saints and holy people, and it kind of runs the gamut down here. We've got different saints that all hold the symbols of their martyrdom. Saint Sebastian holds an arrow. Saint Catherine holds a broken wheel, which was a torture wheel. Saint Lawrence holds a little torch, and others have spikes and torture implements and crosses of their own. And then the bottom shows the dead rising from the grave, and then they're rising up to meet Christ. And then on the far right, we have uh, those souls who are going to be cast down into hell, complete with Charon, the boatman who ferries souls into the afterlife over the river Styx. And then there are a few scenes of suffering and torture in the lower right there, which is interesting. Usually, this idea of energetic chaos and intertwining, which we've seen in other Last Judgment scenes, that's usually reserved only for depictions of hell. But here we see it throughout the entire composition. And here again, you can see what a difference a restoration makes. The image on the left is after it was cleaned, and then the image on the right is before it was cleaned. The cleaning brought out a lot of details. Interesting thing about this particular wall fresco is that depending on who was Pope at the time and what their sensibilities were regarding nudity, the Pope would come in and paint little loincloths on all of the nude figures if he were a little more conservative. And then when the next Pope came around, if he were a little more uh, uh, liberal leaning and wanted to be more original and faithful to Michelangelo's vision, he would have the loincloths removed. And so their clothing would come on and off throughout the centuries, depending on who was sitting on the papal throne. This is a closer view. You can see the figures a little bit more clearly, along with the altar underneath. Little side note, the Sistine Chapel is also where they hold the conclave. Whenever a pope dies and they have to select a new pope, it's held in this room. So, an interesting little side note there for you. If you look in the lower right hand corner, you'll see a figure with donkey ears and a snake wrapped around him. That is Biagio da Cascina, who was the Pope's master of ceremonies, who is said to have complained about this wall fresco, saying that it was disgraceful that in so sacred a place there should have been depicted all those nude figures exposing themselves so shamefully. And then he went on to say that this particular painting was more suitable for, quote, the public baths and taverns than a papal chapel. So, in response, Michelangelo worked Biagio's face into the scene as Minos, one of the judges of the underworld, and gave him donkey ears to indicate his foolishness, and then covered up his own nudity by that snake who also happens to be biting his penis. Biagio complained to the Pope, and the Pope joked back and said that Biagio's and the Pope's jurisdiction did not extend to hell, and so that portrait would have to remain. So, another great example of Michelangelo's sense of humor. And in this slide, the figures in the center top left, that's the Virgin Mary, and then the figure with the glow behind him, that's Jesus as the judge of the Last Judgment. And then as we look down, we come to this figure who's holding a knife and then holding this object in his hand. That is Saint Bartholomew, who was martyred by being flayed to death, or he had his skin removed. And supposedly, the removed skin is a self portrait of Michelangelo, who again felt very guilty. He wanted to glorify God by painting perfected versions of the human body, but he just never felt like he was worthy. Very guilt driven artist. And so this is supposed to be kind of a reference to that, how he felt unworthy even to paint this Last Judgment wall, one of the greatest monuments of High Renaissance painting. Next, we're going to look at the work of Raffaello Sanzio, aka Raphael. He was trained in Umbria by the painter Perugino, and you'll remember his painting Christ delivering the keys to the kingdom to St. Peter, which had that utopian city in the background. Of the two personality types, one being the kind of loner artist that didn't really get along well with people, where we classify Leonardo and Michelangelo. Raphael had the other type of personality, very affable, got along well with almost everyone, good businessman, uh, easy to, a good businessman, easy to get along with, and in as a result of that, he got a lot of commissions. Very popular with popes and diplomats, and had a very long lasting career and reputation, even though he died young at the age of 37. Raphael got his start, his introduction to uh, making a career for himself as a painter by producing a number of images of the Virgin Mary, as well as baby Jesus, so Madonna and child paintings. But even before that, this is one of his earliest pieces, painted at the age of 21. And I just mentioned Perugino and Christ's giving the keys to the kingdom to St. Peter. This is the marriage of the Virgin to St. Joseph, and you can see the influence of his master Perugino here, painted at the ripe old age of 21. So I expect all of you young people to produce something similar at your age of 21 when you come around. We have the idea of the perfection of the circle, which was touted by Alberti earlier, especially in architecture. The building in the background, which is a circular building, looks very similar to Bramante's Tempietto. And then we have also the Renaissance emphasis on the idea of symmetry and geometric clarity. The vanishing point of Raphael's use of one point perspective is right in the center of the doorway of the building, which is directly above the ring that Joseph is about to place on Mary's finger. And this is an example of combining all of these ideas of geometry and perfection and then using them iconographically. You also see one of his favorite color combinations, and that is red and blue. You'll see that appear over and over and over in Raphael's works. And they're primary colors, so there's something pure and spiritually pure and untainted about those, which also relate to the purity of geometry, the purity of the circle, the purity of the square, kind of on a basic level. And just for comparison, here is that image of Perugino's, the delivery of the keys of the kingdom to St. Peter from 1481-82. Though Raphael died young, at the age of 37, his impact is one of the greatest of the Renaissance movement. That's probably because of his personality, because he was easy to get along with. He got a lot of commissions and produced a lot of work. And when you make a lot of work, it gets distributed a lot further, and you have a lot more contact with a lot more people, and you get a lot more patrons. So his influence was much greater than Leonardo and Michelangelo. He not only painted, but he also did a little sculpture. He designed some architecture. He was also an accomplished archaeologist and scholar. He was a polymath. He was also a Renaissance man. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, at the beginning of his career, he painted a great many images of the Madonna and Child, and this one, the Madonna in the Meadow, is one of the best examples. The figures are very crisp and clear. They're in a very rough pyramid composition, which was popularized by many artists in the Renaissance. This clarity recedes into the background, which lacks that mysterious sfumato that Leonardo loved so much. We see the Virgin, and she's sort of protectively uh, putting her hands around baby Jesus as he greets his cousin, John the Baptist, who is a symbol of Christ's earthly mission. Baby Jesus touches the cross, which is the symbol of his future fate, and Mary looks down and has a look on her face of recognition that she's aware of the symbolism. And so her smile is there, but it's kind of faint, almost like she knows what's going to happen. It's been mentioned a few times that Raphael is sort of a synthesist painter, that he combines the best of Leonardo and he combines the best of Michelangelo and adds his own touches to create uh, uh, the best of all three. And I kind of agree with that. He has an awareness of human musculature like Michelangelo does, but he doesn't exaggerate it and put everyone in a state of flex. Male bodies look male and female bodies look female, and they're not all writhing and flexing their muscles on top of one another. Uh, he uses atmospheric perspective, but it's not all enveloped in that heavy fog sfumato like Leonardo does. He also uses gesture and facial expressions to communicate like Leonardo does, but he doesn't go over the top. And then there's a lot of movement and emotional content, but it's not exaggerated like Michelangelo does. And then, as I mentioned, everything has sort of a crispness to it. There's a lot of detail. It's not overly detailed. Everything comes together, and almost all of his works have a very they're imbued with a sense of peacefulness and calm. They have a very pastoral quality in a lot of works by Michelangelo and Leonardo. There's kind of an agitated feeling or a feeling of discomfort and tenseness. And we don't get that with Raphael. Everything's very calm and quiet and peaceful. And I think that's one of the reasons he sold so many paintings. They're easy to look at. They don't cause any discomfort. They're not disquieting or anything like that. So again, I think that's another reason why his impact was so great, and why his influence was so far felt and so lengthy. A lot of people consider him to be one of the first truly academic painters. People would try to emulate him for centuries, all the way up until the 19th century. He was sort of the gold standard as to what painting ought to be, at least style wise. And then here's another one of his Madonna and Child paintings, very calm, very pastoral. The expressions on their faces are uh, they're not overly exaggerated and overly emotional. They're just sort of pleasant. The anatomy is accurate. He also dissected human bodies and performed autopsies. The landscape, even, is sort of calm. We don't have craggy mountains and twisty rivers like Leonardo. It's just a calm Umbrian countryside. This is where he's from, this is what he knows. The atmospheric perspective is also very calm and simple. No impending storms or lightning or anything like that. Just very calm, easy to understand pastoral scenes. Here's another, La Belle Jardinière. Again, it's a scene of the Madonna, and we have baby John the Baptist on the right and baby Jesus on the left. The scene's very calm, very pastoral, nothing to worry about here. The Madonna and the two boys form a pyramidal composition. The depth is there, the atmospheric perspective is there. We've added a few clouds. The landscape recedes way back into the distance, but we don't have tall, craggy mountains and twisty rivers anymore. Just a nice meadow, which typically is where he likes to set his characters. They're all barefoot too. This is holy ground. Once Jesus steps on it with his bare feet, it's holy ground, and so we see that here as well. And as was the case with the previous two, the Virgin wears her traditional color scheme of a red or a bright pink under tunic and a blue outer tunic, uh, which are both part of that favorite color scheme that he likes to use of red and blue. One more. This is the Alba Madonna, which Raphael has painted as a tondo. And you'll remember that a tondo is simply a painting in the shape of a circle. Once again, everything is harmonious and peaceful, pastoral. We've got the Virgin Mary in the center. She's wearing sandals in this one. But then we have baby Jesus, baby John the Baptist on the far left, holding his staff, which is shaped like a cross at the top. And then baby Jesus reaches out and touches it as a reference to his future fate. We see accurate anatomy, but it's not overly exaggerated like we found with Raphael. Once again, he was a synthetic sort of painter. He synthesized the styles of Leonardo and Michelangelo, and then added his own spin on everything to make it a Raphael. So eventually, Pope Julius II hears about this young, up and coming Florentine painter by the name of Raphael, and he summons him to Rome to start a series of commissions. And one of those first commissions was to create a set of murals for the papal apartments, of which this was one. This is his mural of philosophy, also called the School of Athens, which Raphael paints as a tribute to the classical ideas that form the foundation of the rebirth of classicism that formed the Renaissance. So Raphael has included images of some of the greatest classical Greek thinkers and philosophers and scientists of the age, and he uses some of his contemporaries as models for their faces, which is a good way to link the present to the past. School of Athens is a depiction of philosophy. It represents the truth that is acquired through reason. He does not entrust his illustration to allegorical figures, as was customary in the 14th and 15th centuries. Uh, he uses his contemporaries as models because he respects them. And it's also a good way to kind of underscore that Renaissance slash humanistic Neoplatonic way of thinking. We see some elements in this work that he borrows from Michelangelo, who is at the same time working a few yards away in the Sistine Chapel. And he would have seen him working and probably visited him pretty regularly. We see Michelangelo's energy and physical strength. All of that simulated architecture as well is present there. Even the colors that Michelangelo used, which we just saw, that were revealed by that recent cleaning of the Sistine Chapel, are visible here in a similar palette. He's not copying Michelangelo and he's not copying Leonardo, even though there is a little hint of sfumato here. Uh, but he's using it as an assimilation of those styles, again, expressing it with kind of a sense of grace and harmony that he doesn't really see in his contemporaries' work. We see scientific perspective, atmospheric perspective, geometric harmony. Some equate this with the Last Supper. He also has some other kind of traditional devices here. One is isocephaly, which means all of the heads here are on the same level, which means that none of them is more important than the other. We've got Leonardo in the center. We've got Michelangelo here in the foreground. He was added later on. I don't believe he was in the original drawings for the composition. And then in the foreground on the right, we have Bramante, the architect who designed the Tempietto and St. Peter's Basilica. Uh, Leonardo here is dressed as Plato, and Michelangelo is Heraclitus. Bramante is supposed to be Euclid, the great mathematician. Here's a closer view, and you can see some of the dynamic poses here. The figures are moving, but they're not writhing like Michelangelo's did. And you can see the attention to detail in anatomy, that little hint of sfumato as we recede back into the distance, but then everything is kind of linked together with that clarity and crispness that we see in Raphael's work. Everything existing in a state of harmony. It's really incredible too to see these in person. They have it has quite the impact on you versus seeing it reproduced in a slide. Just ask this guy. he was quite impacted by seeing the School of Athens in amongst all those rude tourists. I almost got left behind by my tour group when I stopped to take this selfie. So I did it for you. I did it for you kids. So please enjoy. Gosh, I don't remember being that young, but I guess I was. I took this picture. Here are a couple of details showing Da Vinci and Michelangelo. You can see Leonardo's finger pointed up to the sky, like we saw in a number of his paintings. That's sort of his signature gesture that he likes to use over and over. Uh, Leonardo is supposed to be Plato, and Michelangelo is Heraclitus, who was kind of a bummer, depressing philosopher. And so Michelangelo, who was also sort of a bummer, a solitary, brooding guy, he's got his head propped on his hand, looking down. But at the same time, he's wearing the contemporary garments of a stonecutter, and he was also added later on after the Sistine Chapel had been completed and displayed. This is another detail that shows not only Bramante over here working out some geometry problems, but also a self portrait of Raphael. He's the only figure that looks out at us. He's not really an interlocutor, uh, but sort of. He's the only one that kind of engages us, but he doesn't invite us into the scene. In this case, he's just looking out at us. Uh, they're kind of reflections of their personalities. Leonardo looks out, he's engaging, he wants to participate with things. Michelangelo looks down and doesn't really want to talk to anyone. And then Leonardo's got this genius sort of personality and has all these ideas. And so his finger is pointed to the sky. So it's kind of neat that their personalities are sort of reflected by their poses. Leonardo never completed anything that he began, but he contemplated everything before he began. And Michelangelo had a temper. Raphael was quite social and amiable with his patrons and got a lot of work. So a neat little connection there with the personalities. In 1511, Raphael prepares a drawing for a portrait that he would complete a year later. The textures of the drawing are transferred to the painting. The blank forehead in the drawing becomes a highlight in the painting. Uh, Cross-hatched shadows become uh, chiaroscuro shadows in the painting later on, and so on. This is the first known portrait of an individual pope painted during the pope's lifetime, first in a long tradition of many popes. He's wearing his casual everyday clothing instead of his regal ceremonial clothing. So it's not a glorifying image of power, but a more of a psychological picture of Julius II, the man. He's got very deeply recessed eyes and sunken cheeks that reflect his 70 years, which give him an air of wisdom and also deep contemplation. And he looks tired. Remember, he was a very temperamental and uh, going to war type of pope in his younger days. So he's had quite the contentious career as a pope, and he's just exhausted. And he looks that way. He looks tired. The other interesting thing about this is the three-quarter view. We see three-quarters of his body, and his body has also got a three-quarter turn to it, which is the standard for Renaissance portrait painting. So all of that is contained here. And there are a few other little subtleties. The pattern on the wallpaper, the acorns on the top of the throne, those are all symbols of the Pope's family name and so forth, which you could trace back to Northern painting and how they like to hide little symbols in their portraits to reference the detailed imagery or tell stories and that type of thing. This is Raphael's Sistine Madonna, which was painted as oil on canvas instead of oil on panel painting. It was intended to decorate the tomb of Julius II, which would explain the use of the curtains on either side. Some believe it was originally hung at the high altar of the church. The Virgin here has changed her role. Though she is a Madonna or an image of Mary with the baby Jesus, she has become kind of a hybrid figure of Mary the Mother and Mary the Intercessor. Her bare feet lack adornment and support this as a way to allow the viewer to better relate to her. Remember, when we see uh, the Virgin Mary in a state of humility, she is a more humanized version, so her lack of shoes would suggest that. And though she's plainly adorned, she herself is not plain. She's very beautiful. So that's an example of Raphael's supernatural idealism and beauty. And this is also the painting, if you look at the very bottom in the middle, the painting that has those two over commercialized little pair of cherubs. I've seen them on countless shower curtains, candle holders, salt and pepper shakers, Valentine's Day cards, pillow cases. So many of those might never have been made if it were not for this one painting, and or at least part of this one painting. I'm sure your grandmother still has those pillowcases in her guest bedroom that has these two little angels on it. Raphael had a special talent for portraiture and received a number of commissions for them. He was again a master of synthesis. He was able to combine an almost photorealism with ideal humanism of the High Renaissance, like that painting that nearly swallows the personality of the individual who was the Mona Lisa. Here we see a rather unflattering, unidealized portrait of an overweight, plainly unattractive pope, and yet he has a very commanding presence and sense of dignity and power, which is accented by a heightened use of color, light, and texture on the form of the pope, and it's diminished on the accompanying two cardinals, which are behind him. In the next slide, you'll see this a little more clearly in the restored version. And here we are viewing the restored version, and I think this is one of the paintings by Raphael that shows more of a northern influence than most. We have the little objects on the table, the magnifying glass, the ink pot, the book, which shows a northern influence, and then the textures, the bronze of the throne, the velour of the capelet, the tablecloth, the embroidery, all those things that northern painters love to paint. Raphael has kind of gotten on the bandwagon with here. So definitely he was familiar with those northern approaches to painting and has incorporated some of that in his work that we see here. This is another portrait by Raphael, a rather unusual portrait. This one happens to be of his mistress, who was the daughter of a baker. It's one of the only works that Raphael actually signed, and he signs it on her armband, which is kind of a slave bracelet, which suggests his possession of this woman. The portrait here is all about sensuality, and because she's topless, it's about the things that Raphael likes most about his girlfriend. The foliage in the background is a reference to love and perhaps fertility. She has this veil that she's pulling up over her abdomen, which may also refer to fertility. She maybe is perhaps pregnant here. There may be a slight idealization of her form, especially in her face. But as we all know, when one is in love, one tends to see past all the many faults of the loved one. And we see here Raphael's tomb in the Pantheon in Rome, and you can go visit it even today if you're lucky enough to be able to travel to Rome. So we remember Raphael as a synthetist. He was a combiner of styles. He took a little of Michelangelo, he took a little of Leonardo, and added his own touch and created a very crisp, fine example of high Renaissance academic painting, which would last a long, long time. Uh, his influence did not escape Michelangelo's notice. Michelangelo outlived him a long time, and in 1541, he was still complaining about that. He was jealous of Raphael's influence and wrote in a letter to a friend that, quote, everything he knew about art he got from me, unquote. Now we're going to look at some examples of 16th century Venetian painting, and we'll see some of the influences of our High Renaissance friends that we've just seen, as well as some of the unique characteristics of Venice itself that appear in these works. And we'll examine some of the more influential painters like Bellini and Giorgione, and of course, Titian. This is the work of Giorgione, a Venetian painter who helped to sort of found the entire Venetian painting movement along with Titian. He died in his 30s, and the main difference between Venetian painting and Florentine painting of the High Renaissance is that uh, High Renaissance Florentine and Roman painting is pretty clear and easy to understand. It's easy to grasp. It tells a story, it tells a narrative, or it's an implementation of worship, which is easy to understand and grasp. But in Venice, the works, especially that of Giorgione, tends to be a little more mysterious and ambiguous. There's a little more mystery to it, and you have to think about it a lot more. It's kind of meant to be pondered, and so as a result, a lot of these paintings by Giorgione have been discussed and theorized without any real satisfactory explanation rising to the forefront. This one is called Portrait of an Old Woman, also Col Tempo. It's a very dimly lit painting. She has her mouth slightly open. She has a cap very loosely sitting on her head. Her hair is kind of hanging out from underneath her cap. Her clothes are sort of wrinkled and askew. She points to herself, and then in her hand she has a curled piece of paper which says with time or col tempo. So, what does it mean? On its surface, with time, and she points to herself, it's a message, it's a warning almost, saying that with time, uh, you are going to be just like she is. She's old, she's maybe confused. Her open mouth suggests early stages of perhaps Alzheimer's or dementia. And so she's referencing the ravages of time with time and its effects on the human body. The dimly lit atmosphere lends sort of a hazy, dreamlike quality. It has a kind of golden quality to it as well, which is something we see frequently in Venetian painting. Venice, is the city of canals, and the light that reflects up in the city from all of the canals has kind of a golden quality that attracted artists from all over Europe for many centuries. They wanted to capture that golden light. And usually, when we see paintings that were completed in Venice, they do have that kind of yellowish golden quality to them. So, this is the first one we'll see from Giorgione, the warning about the ravages of old age, the ravages of time. Don't make fun of the elderly because you too shall be elderly. It's not unlike the Memento Mori that we saw in Masaccio's Holy Trinity painting that we saw, uh, That which I am, you too shall be. Remember that one? The skeleton lying on top of the tomb. This is similar. This is Giorgione's The Tempest or The Storm. And you can see in the center, in the far distance, an approaching impending storm, the dark clouds, the bolt of lightning in the background. Truth be told, we're not sure what this painting means. This is another kind of mysterious painting. Another feature of Venetian paintings, the Venetian artists like to illustrate kind of idyllic stories of pastoral love and poetry and portray the beauty of Venus and the nymphs of Greece and that kind of thing. Lots of allegories and metaphors and uh, poetry and that kind of thing. So it's really mysterious, and as a result, there's no definitive meaning for what this painting means. Also, the figures aren't particularly carefully drawn, like they would have been were they produced in Florence or Rome. The composition isn't really that good, but the uh, pictures clearly blended well. It combines together by the light and the air and the atmosphere, but it's weird. There's just a weirdness to it. It has that golden quality of being painted in Venice, but it's that weird light of a thunderstorm. You know, if you're outside and it gets really dark right before a thunderstorm hits, this is that light, that kind of supernatural, weird light. But what's happening? We have a figure of a lady, and she's nursing a baby on the right. And then on the left, we have a soldier type figure. And between them, we have a wall with a broken column. Then we have kind of a classical triumphal arch in the background on the left, and then a bridge over a canal in the center. More cities in the background. We don't know. We don't know what this is supposed to be. One interpretation is that it's supposed to be Adam and Eve after the fall, after they've been expelled from the Garden of Eden. That would explain why Eve is partially nude on the right, which could represent shame, and then the baby could then represent Cain. There's also along the shoreline, just barely visible, a snake, which could also represent Satan. And then the garden or the city in the background could represent the Garden of Eden. And then the broken columns could represent death. But that's just a theory. We really, we really don't know what it means. So insert your own meaning here to the fun mystery that is Giorgione. This is another Giorgione painting called Pastoral Symphony. And you'll notice that Titian is given credit as a partial collaborator on this, and that's entirely possible, nay, probable, because Giorgione died at such a young age. Titian finished a lot of his work for him. We don't know to what extent, but you definitely can see his hand in a number of Giorgione paintings. So attribution of some of these works are a little difficult. We only have six fully completed paintings by Giorgione that have come down to us anyway. So, what do we see? It's an allegorical painting. We have some musicians in a countryside, another allegorical figure that kind of evokes classical Rome or Greece on the left, pouring water or retrieving water from a well on the left, and then the musicians in the center. And then as we go down into the far right, a shepherd and some sheep. It's been interpreted a number of ways. Probably it is an allegory of poetry, And then the female figures in the foreground are the muses of poetry. Their nakedness reveals that they are divine and ideal. The figure pouring the water is superior tragic poetry, and then the one holding the flute is the muse of the less prestigious comedy or pastoral poetry. But we don't really know. I do know that it has that golden quality of light that we see in a number of Venetian paintings. It permeates the whole thing. And also, these three figures in the center, you will see another painting later on by Edouard Manet, his Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, or Luncheon on the Grass, where the figures are based on this group of figures. It's two clothed male figures sitting in a park along with one nude female figure. So that was inspirational to one of the influencers of Impressionism down the road. Another Giorgione, a very golden Venetian painting. This is his Sleeping Venus. This is a different approach to depicting a nude. It's one of the first modern works of art in which the female figure is the principal and only subject in the picture. It also inaugurates the genre of the nude in a landscape setting as one of the great themes of European art. The contours of her body are sort of echoed in the landscape. We've got all these sort of curvy shapes here that we also see appearing in the landscape next to her. So we're kind of equating her with the land itself. And we accent the smooth curves of her body with kind of the angular folds of the drapery here, just like you would contrast the color green with the color red. We're contrasting curvy, smooth shapes with hard, angular shapes. She's having what is probably an erotic dream, which is suggested by her hand placement. But overall, it's different, kind of shocking, and probably was especially shocking back in the 16th century when it was first revealed. We don't know how much Titian had to do with this, but we do know that he painted a very similar version not too long after this one. So eventually, Giorgione dies of the plague, and 28 years after Giorgione's Sleeping Venus, which Titian may have finished up for him, he paints his own. This is the Venus of Urbino, which Mark Twain once called, quote, the foulest, the vilest, the obscenest picture the world possesses. So Titian was, again, one of the most long lived painters. He died at the age of 91 in the year 1576. He was a pupil of Bellini, a friend of Giorgione, and completed a number of Giorgione's unfinished canvases, considered to be the Renaissance's premier colorist. His favorite color was red. You'll hardly find a single Titian painting where he did not include the color red. He was not a universal scholar like Leonardo was. He was not an outstanding personality like Michelangelo was. He was not a versatile and attractive man like Raphael was. He was principally a painter, but he was a painter whose handling of paint equaled Michelangelo's mastery of drawing. Uh, and he was productive. He had a workshop which helped him complete a large number of commissions, and he was very disciplined. He worked and worked and worked and worked. He was able to experiment too. He disregarded some of the time honored rules of composition and drawing emphasis. Instead, he relied on color to restore the unity that was broken up by some of the laws of drawing that he had forsaken. The figure of Venus has the same hand gesture over her naughty bits. So she's awake in this case. So instead of having an erotic dream, we may interpret this as modesty. In the background, we see a couple of lady servants getting her clothes out of a big chest. Venus's hair is red and long. Titian likes to paint ladies with long red hair. And then we have that golden light appearing once again, which permeates the whole scene and kind of enhances the softness of the flesh here of the nude body. Uh, Also in the background, some plants. There's roses. There's a crepe myrtle. And then there's a dog on the bed there, which is equated with Venus. So it may very well be a portrait of the goddess Venus, or it may be a woman that Titian is comparing with Venus. But our friend Edouard Manet will base his painting Olympia on this painting, the Venus of Urbino. Same pose, basically, same sort of bedclothes, but instead of a little dog at the foot of the bed, he puts a black cat. But we'll see that later on when we get to the 19th century. This is an alternate version, which shows a little bit better bit of that golden light quality that I talked about earlier. And then here it is as it hangs on the wall in the Uffizi. It's an impressive painting to see in person, and I highly recommend that you stop and spend a few minutes in front of it once you get to visit the Uffizi in Florence. Giovanni Bellini, one of the members of the leading family of painters in Venice, the Bellini family, was Titian's teacher. And Titian also was able to work on a number of Bellini paintings, like this one called Feast of the Gods. It shows the incident of the attempted rape of Lotus, who was a nymph mentioned by Ovid. She was the daughter of Neptune and Nereus, and during a festival in honor of Liber that she attended, Priapus tried to rape her while she was asleep, but she was awakened by a sudden cry of Salinius's donkey and ran off, leaving Priapus in embarrassment as everyone else woke up too and became aware of his intentions. We see the story shown at the edges of the composition here in kind of an undramatic way, presumably showing the moment shortly before the key incident with Silenus and his donkey on the far left, and Priapus and Lotus at the right, with everyone but Lotus still wide awake. Bellini was over 80 years old when he started it, and it looks a little different from Titian's other paintings. Titian's work is a little bit softer, and Bellini's work has that sort of Raphaelian crispness to it. It does have the red, and we don't know whether Bellini or Titian added the red in the center there in those garments, but it's very similar to another Titian painting that we're about to see about a bacchanal. This is Titian's Bacchanal of the Andrians, which is another further exploration into the world of sensual pleasure. This is inspired by an eyewitness account of such an event by an ancient author. And you can see why Titian was considered to be the great colorist of the High Renaissance. We have very bold, contrasting blue greens and oranges and reds that add an element of richness that permeates this work as well as a number of other works by Titian. There's an obvious influence here from those sort of orgiastic compositions that we find in ancient art, but with a new expressiveness and awareness of expressive power of the human body that we saw with Da Vinci. It's a scene of drunken revelry, but with a very sly commentary by Titian on the silliness of such frivolity. There's a little child. Well, first of all of these figures are drunk, very, very drunk. In the background, there's Noah, who was famously drunk after the ark finally landed. In the tree above, there's a turkey, which is kind of a silly animal. So he's talking about, he's equating drunkenness and silliness, and everyone's drinking the wine and they're partying and laughing and making out and so forth. So drunk that their clothes are falling off. Remember our previous uh, painting about Lotus passing out from drunkenness. But then in the middle of it all, if you look closely, there's a little boy. And the little boy is peeing. And there's a little stream right next to where this lady has passed out drunk. And he's peeing in the stream. And then these guys are scooping up the water that the boy's peeing in, and they're going to mix it with wine, which is pretty typical. If you wanted to drink a lot of wine, you had to mix it with water or you would just pass out. And they're going to drink it. So they're going to end up drinking this little boy's pee, which is what silly drunks do. They do silly things, and so it creates a cycle. Uh, the people get drunk, the boy pees in the water, the people drink the water, mix it with the wine, and end up drinking wine, water, and pee. Oh, how silly those drinkers of alcohol are. And I'll show you a few details here. Here is a closer view. You can see all those activities happening that I just talked about. A lot of textures at play here as well, from glass to metal to grass and fabric and leaves and water. All of those things that we saw our northern friends emphasizing in their painting have been emphasized here as well. And then here, just in case you thought I was kidding, there's a close up of child peeing in the stream and the other people scooping up the water and putting it on a plate and passing it to their friends. Hey, I'll scoop up a big jug of it here and mix it with the wine, and we'll have a real good party. Hey, does this wine taste funny to you? It tastes funny to me. As Titian aged, his brushwork got looser and looser. Remember, he was sort of a loose painter anyway, but his brushwork got even looser as he got older, looser and expressive. He did keep that very bold Venetian coloring, and he also continued to use the color red. And he continues to explore mythology, Greek mythology. We're still trying to connect uh, contemporary life to classicism, and so we still do that. And we see that here with the rape of Europa, in which Zeus comes down and takes one of his many different forms in order to seduce a mortal, because that's what Zeus does. Here's another Titian, another later one, where his brushwork gets very loose and expressive, uh, very frenetic, lots of movement, lots of energy. And it also depicts Zeus trying to seduce a mortal. Here, instead of a bull or a swan, Zeus changes himself into a golden shower in order to seduce Danae, who had been locked in a tower because it was foretold that any child she had would grow up to kill her father. And so the father tried to prevent that by locking her in a tower, but Zeus found a way in as a golden rainstorm. Once again, as Titian continues to age, his work gets looser and looser and looser. He begins to apply his paint in a much thicker impasto, which is a thicker layer of paint, which kind of ends up denying the figures that sense of the sculpturesque that had pervaded most of the work of the High Renaissance. Here, they look almost translucent, like they're made of smoke, very otherworldly, very supernatural. There's a sense of the ethereal that occurs again and again in his biblical representations, which is a reference to the spiritual nature of the work. Through all the action of the movement here of the figures, there's still a sense of hope and a sense of underlying calm. You can see the dove flying down to Mary as the angel comes into the scene. She's reacting, but not overly reacting. And then once again, there's that golden quality that permeates the whole scene, but it's very dark. It almost looks like a Rembrandt painting, which we will see later on in the Baroque period. There's kind of a, I don't know, it's a sense of almost foreboding, even though it's a joyous thing. Mary's about to become pregnant. The dove is flying down and is going to uh, cause the Immaculate Conception. It's all still very dark and almost monochromatic. We still have the red, but it's a very dark and earthy palette that Titian uses here. This is another very loose painting by Titian, very expressive. It's a Pietà, and you'll remember that that is a scene of Mary holding the body of her dead son. And it's also a very dark painting, high contrast, sort of a foreshadowing of Caravaggio and his use of tenebrism, which we will see down the road. Very expressionistic brushstroke, a lot of movement, a lot of motion, a lot of emotion and energy in this work. This is a detail of the head of Mary Magdalene from the Pietà, and you can see just how very loose it's painted. Think back and compare it to the sharpness of Raphael and Michelangelo and the draftsmanship of Leonardo. All that's kind of gone. It's more like an Impressionist painting or a German Expressionist painting than it is a Renaissance painting. Titian's almost heading into mannerism, or perhaps he's already there, which has a whole different agenda than what we saw in High Renaissance painting. In his last years, Titian painted a series of paintings dedicated to the Passion of the Christ, and these include Crowning of the Thorns, The Mocking of Christ, uh, Ecce Homo, and two versions of Christ carrying the cross. And in these works, he adds an intense dramatic power. The brushstrokes dissolve into these really rapidly applied dabs of paint. He's not trying to reproduce nature, he's trying to convey the raw emotion of the scene and also the painter who is participating in the tragic subject of the picture. He wants you to feel what he feels as he's painting it. And we still have that very dark, earthy palette. In this case, it's a very sad scene, just like the Pietà. So the darkness is very appropriate. It's a dark, emotionally dark scene. So he uses dark colors to kind of underscore that. And the last painting by Titian that we will see is his Allegory of Prudence, an unusual portrait by Titian. It's an allegory or a parable for the passing stages of life in the form of prudence or good judgment. Titian is the old man on the left in a self portrait. Uh, Underneath him is the face of a wolf. and it says an inscription over his head from the past. And then in the center is Titian's son, Orazio, who has a very thick black beard like the mane of a lion, and under him is a lion, and over his head it says the present acts prudently, and then over on the right we have a young man over a dog's head, and his inscription says, "Lest it spoil future action." So when you put it all together, it says, "From the past, the present acts prudently, lest it spoil future action." Such metaphors have classical roots and relate well to Renaissance humanistic thought. Now we're going to see some examples of Italian mannerism. We see examples of it not just in painting, but also in sculpture and architecture. It has a kind of a sense of artifice to it, of being synthetic, false, manufactured, overly elaborate. It's a style that is favored by the elite and the nobility, and the subject matter kind of reflects that, as you'll see. Mannerist painting, much like Mannerist sculpture, is kind of a reaction against some of the ideas that were so important to the Italian Renaissance. The Renaissance artists tried to not just connect the present to the past philosophically, but they were really about emphasizing nature and trying to be accurate with their depictions. Mannerism was not. Mannerism wanted to move beyond the Renaissance, and so it was a reaction against it. And the artists had ideas of trying to do something wholly different. There's kind of an underlying current of eroticism that pervades a lot of Mannerist painting. There is an undercurrent of the nobility being patrons. This is what rich people like to see, and so that's tends to be who patronizes Mannerist work. It tends to be overly decorative in some areas, lots of elongated, swaying forms, like the figura serpentinata, or the snake-like figure. We'll see that appear in a number of pieces. Lighting is kind of weird. So again, we're trying to get more of a emotional reaction from the viewer rather than presenting nature in an accurate way. This is a self portrait by Parmigianino. He also has some high Renaissance attributes, and you can see that here with his interest in extreme perspective. He combines that with the Flemish love of mirrors and details. He painted this with the intention of impressing the Pope and possibly landing a Vatican court painter job, and he succeeded. He was inspired by his own image that he had seen in a barbershop mirror. From then on, he became obsessed with the ability to create and eventually became preoccupied with the concept of alchemy as well, so much so that he eventually abandons painting altogether in order to pursue this passion. He had several brushes with the law concerning his counterfeiting activities. He made fake metals that he claimed were gold and fake money. Here, all of the details are accurate as they are reflected in a convex glass, accurately rendered to the very smallest detail. The prominence of the hand in the foreground is a reference to Parmigianino's abilities as an artist. Artists use their hands to create. The hand of God creates, and so in a way, Parmigianino has created an image of himself as a Christ or God-like figure. It's not the first time artists have done this, and it won't be the last. It's one of those comparisons that gets made over and over. Gods, artists comparing themselves to gods. This is an alternate photograph of the same painting, a little clearer. Easier to see the details here. The lighting is particularly impressive, as are all the textures that Parmigianino manages to convey here. He died young, at the age of 37, and was buried naked with a cypress cross upon his chest. So he was just a strange individual, but a talented painter. This is Parmigianino's Madonna with the Long Neck from 1535, and where the High Renaissance was thoroughly interested in connecting modern times to the classical past, modern to the Renaissance. You can see a complete lack of classical interest in classical renderings of the human body here, traded off for a far more expressionistic style. The Madonna here is a figura serpentinata, or serpentine, snake like figure. Her proportions and those of the baby Jesus are very long and curvy, like those of a snake. Just look at her hands. The poses also are very twisted and turned and convoluted. And there's also sort of a lingering eroticism here that typifies mannerist painting. There are figures that are scantily clad and look at each other and the viewer with subtle lasciviousness. Take a look at this guy. He's sort of eyeballing the Virgin Mary in an untoward way. There are a few symbols present. There's an unfinished column in the background, and you can see that here. And then there is a old philosopher on the lower right who's got a scroll that's unrolled, but no one is listening to him. And that's a reference to the past ideas of classicism and painting that are now irrelevant. We have moved on from those, so they're behind us now. It's Christian imagery, but here it seems kind of outdated and obsolete. Scale is weird. The column doesn't support anything because we've reached our limits in classicism. Parmigianino was, like many of the Mannerists, a bit of an eccentric. And again, according to his wishes, he was buried naked with a cypress cross standing up on his chest, which was a reference to his God complex. He was also described as eccentric, sloppy, melancholic by Vasari, the contemporary Italian art historian, not to mention his alchemy, where he tried to turn base metals into gold and also tried to find a new sort of metal to make engravings from. Here's a closer view where you can see all that elongation of forms, the Virgin Mary's elongation. Baby Jesus is this very elongated form. Even the hands, the Virgin Mary's hands are very long and snake-like. Uh, Composition is very crowded and dense. These are all mannerist traits that we will see more and more examples of. This is Agnolo Bronzino's allegory called Venus, Cupid, Folly, and Time. Once again, you can see the mannerist leanings towards subjects that have sexual overtones. And there's also a preference for mythological and pagan subject matter, which tends to lend itself more towards these kind of erotic subjects. We don't have a lot of that with biblical subject matter. When we do see mannerist paintings of biblical subject matter, there almost seems to be kind of a denial of the sacredness of it. Anything that we had before that showed any type of reverence or sacredness is diminished within mannerism. It's almost like they're just sort of going through the motions. Bronzino includes the very dense composition, and you can see that here Also, a lot of writhing forms, a lot of nudity, eroticism. We have Venus in the foreground, this long, sort of snake like body. And she's kissing Cupid, her son, also with a very awkward, elongated, snake like body. There are a lot of textures here. There are a lot of rich textures, satiny cloth, masks, jewels, that sort of thing. These are what the aristocratic patrons like to see, the nobility like to see these sorts of textures. So that's reflected in the work that we see. Lots of symbolic imagery. There's a screaming hag in the background. She's the personification of envy. We don't know who she's envious of, but she's envious. There's a putti, which represents folly. So this is a silly scene, a useless scene that happens. And then there are other figures. There's a figure in the background, this half snake, half girl figure that holds a honeycomb. And you can see her snake body down here. She represents fraud. And then I'm trying to remember who the old man is. Time, I think, has thrown back this curtain and reveals everything that's going on here. Other identities of other figures is a mystery and open to interpretation. But that's kind of where we go with mannerism. It's not all clear. It's not all easy to understand. It's evocative. It's erotic. It's dense. It's convoluted. On the surface, when you first glance at it, you might think it's classically inspired, but a little deeper look tells you that it's really not. And this is a closer view. You can see some of the details, especially of those textures, the cloth, the jewels, and you can see the figure of time has this hourglass behind him, which is why he was interpreted that way. The wings of Cupid, everything very photorealistically painted, uh, but still kind of overly decorative and not really with the goal of portraying naturalism at all. This is a work by another, uh, more of a borderline mannerist painter, the work of Tintoretto, a very successful painter. His daughter worked for him as sort of his manager. He had a large workshop of painters that assisted him in completing many, many commissions. He sort of got his start by completing a work for a competition. He won a competition by the Scuola di San Rocco in Venice. They had a large ovular space in the ceiling, and they wanted different artists to come up with a proposal for what they would paint in it. And they said the winner would receive the commission to do all of the walls, which was I don't know, 15 or 20 other paintings. So it was a pretty prestigious thing. So a few weeks go by, and it comes time to reveal the submissions for the contest, and everyone shows up, and there's this big drapery covering up the ceiling. And Tintoretto walks in and pulls a cord, and the drapery falls down. And he has painted this already in the ceiling, and he donates it to the Brotherhood. Well, according to the Brotherhood of the Scuola di San Rocco, they can never turn down a gift that is freely given to them. So he got them on a technicality, and because they had to accept it as a gift, Tintoretto wins the competition. And also gets sour grapes from a lot of his fellow artists who were living and working in Venice. So that just gives you a little bit of insight into his prowess as a businessman. Stylistically, he's not really that significant. Even when he paints biblical scenes, there's sort of a resurgence of that denial of the sacredness. We don't get a sense of necessarily of things being miraculous or sacred or supernatural or anything like that. He's just kind of fulfilling a commission and really nothing more. This is another work by Tintoretto, his Christ Before Pilate from 1566. Tintoretto lived to be about 76, and as I mentioned, he had a pretty successful workshop, many assistants. He ends up becoming the official court painter to the Republic of Venice. He embraced Venetian classicism, but when the Reformation came about and then the subsequent Counter Reformation, he altered his style a bit to fit the desires of his patrons, mainly the church, as so many other artists would do to survive. When the Counter Reformation comes about, and just to kind of summarize it, so the Catholic Church had become corrupt in some areas. Martin Luther uh, protests it, and then Protestantism is born, and there's a great schism in the church, and Protestantism splinters off and takes a lot of the membership with it. And so the church launches a counter reformation to point out the fallacies of Protestantism and regain its lost membership. And to that end, the church commissions a lot of artwork that puts an emphasis on the power of the church by depicting scenes of the miraculous, scenes of the supernatural, and the power of God to try and move people emotionally to rejoin the church. And so Tintoretto kind of skews his work a little bit to that end to gain their favor. He was a Mannerist painter who wanted to, quote, paint like Titian and design like Michelangelo, which he does to some extent, but he still retains his own qualities while also exploiting some of the qualities of Mannerism as well. In this piece, Christ Before Pilate, you can see Titian's bold brushstrokes and then that luminous sort of coloring that he used towards the end of his life, highly contrasting lights and darks. But then we also see Michelangelo's agitated sculptural figures, dense, writhing compositions, and so forth. And then the Mannerist use of that kind of overall flickering light quality. And then there's this sort of ghostly, gaunt Christ standing before Pilate. He doesn't give off any vibrations of divinity. He's just a mortal man, basically, with kind of an artificial halo that you can just barely make out. Other than that halo, there's nothing here to indicate that this is a holy figure, not unrelated to Fra Lippi's Tarquinia Madonna. You'll remember that there was nothing there really to indicate that she had any supernatural qualities at all. The whole scene's very surreal and dark and unsettling, quite the opposite of the calm pastoral harmony that we saw with Raphael. Here we see Tintoretto's version of the Last Supper, which also contains his kind of jaded, pessimistic view of humanity. He has some innovative things, the diagonal plane of the table, the uneven lighting of the figures. There's a lot of gravity here, too. Uh, all of the figures succumb to the forces of gravity, which kind of denies them of their divinity. Their halos are just really slight glows around their heads, except for the figure of Christ. You have this very holy scene happening, but in addition to that, we have other things happening. For instance, in the foreground, which is the traditional scene of focus, this is the focal point of the paint. We have a couple of servants doing dishes and putting plates away and that kind of thing. And they're completely ignoring the very holy event that's taking place behind them. And then next to them, we've got a cat going into the uh, busing basket where they put all the leftover food, and cats in there looking for things. There's a dog under the table chewing on a bone. So there's all these things here that kind of deny this of its divinity, deny it its sacredness. Why would you put all these everyday things and just take, with Leonardo, it was all about the Last Supper and the event and the psychology of the event and the emotionalism and the supernaturality. And here, it's kind of the opposite. He records the Last Supper, but it's just barely there. There is this weird lamp too that shines this light that then turns into these transparent angels. The whole scene is lit with this flickering mannerist light. It's just unsettling. It doesn't look like a very holy painting at all. Here's a view of it in its frame in the church of San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice. It's fun because in order to see it, you have to put a euro into a timer on the wall, and then the lights will come on so that you can see it. So, of course, I paid the euro, and then I took my picture so that you all could see it. So, you're welcome for that. Enjoy. Here is a closer view of the servants, kind of ignoring the holy event that's happening there right next to them. We also have a different, unconventional view of Judas. He's not on the opposite side of the table. The only way we know that's Judas is that he doesn't have that slight glow around his head like the other apostles do. And then, of course, the irreverent cat licking the dirty dishes in the basket, and the dog behind him chewing on a bone under the table. Highly irreverent and almost blasphemous to put these sorts of things into what is supposed to be a very reverent and holy scene. This is a work by Paolo Veronese, who also entered that competition for the ceiling painting at the Scuola di San Rocco. This is his painting, The Christ in the House of Levi. It originally began as a Last Supper, uh, but he also added a lot of questionable characters. You see Jesus and the disciples eating here in the center, but then he adds all of these strange figures, clowns, drunkards. There's some German people, there's some dwarves. And so the patrons asked him about it and questioned it. And so he ends up acquiescing by changing the title to Christ in the House of Levi. Levi was the other name for Matthew, the tax collector. And so that was a story from the Bible where Jesus goes and eats with a tax collector who is considered to be among the dregs of society. And so then it was acceptable. If he's eating with the dregs of society, then it's acceptable to have acrobats and buffoons and dwarves and German and all that stuff. There's even a servant over here who's holding a cloth with blood on it because he got a bloody nose. We don't know why he had a bloody nose. It's just one of those weird things that's put in there that kind of denies the sacredness of the moment. This was also one of the most impactful paintings I remember seeing in Venice because it's so huge. The figures are almost life size, slightly larger than life size. The whole painting's 42 feet wide. And I remember walking into the room and seeing it after seeing it in a book where it's reproduced about 4 inches wide. And then to see it at 42 feet wide is something to see. And then here's a photo with people in it, just to give you an idea of the scale of that painting. Uh, Once again, all sense of this having any sort of divinity in it is lost, except for Jesus. Now, not only the disciples don't even have halos, only Jesus has one, and it's just a very faint glow. We're still denying the divinity in this Mannerist work. Here's a detail of some of the stranger cast of characters present at the House of Levi. There's our servant with the bloody nose. This Veronese, the Triumph of Venice, was commissioned by the Venetian government for the Palazzo Ducale, Ducal Palace. We have rising above the banks of clouds there the personification of Venice, enthroned between the twin towers of the city's arsenal, and he's about to be crowned by these flying victories above his head or her head. And then at her feet are her counselors, personifications of peace, abundance, fame, happiness, honor, security, and freedom. Um, there are subjects of Venice down at the bottom who are kind of undisturbed and unmoved, uh, not really in awe at what's happening, but the whole thing together has a lot of energy and movement, lots of foreshortening and emphatic perspective, flickering light effects, lots of dynamic sorts of pictorial elements for what is essentially a political allegory. And very crowded, very dense, lots of people, lots of things happening, which would make it a Mannerist painting. We have referenced Giorgio Vasari a few times, the great Italian art historian and the chronicler of the High Renaissance. Here's one of his paintings. This is one of a set of four that he'd painted for the study of Francesco de' Medici, that famous name again. Each painting was to represent one of the four elements, and this one was water. It's the story of the creation of coral. Andromeda had boasted of her great beauty, and as punishment for, and she said it was greater than the Nereids, who were the daughters of the sea, and so she was punished for that by being tied to a rock and left as a sacrifice for a monster created by Poseidon specifically to avenge this insult. She was freed by Perseus, who was the slayer of Medusa. He kills the monster and chops its head off, and the blood from the monster falls into the sea and forms coral. And you can see all the players in the story, which kind of remind us a little bit of Raphael and the softness of the skin and so forth. But it's still very dense. There's a lot of movement, there's a lot of writhing forms. The nudity here has an erotic undertone as well. Um, so with with the vast kind of soaring epic background, all of this with the dark flickering light as well would qualify it as a Mannerist work. This is Correggio's Assumption of the Virgin, which is part of a new style that emerges in 1520 in northern Italy called the Proto Baroque or Pre Baroque, because it's kind of a transitional style between Mannerism and the Baroque style. It's also the beginning of a tradition of ceiling painting that becomes kind of a hallmark of painting at that time in Italy. Ceiling painting eventually becomes kind of a status symbol, and a lot of those patrons of ceiling painters try to outdo each other. Whoever has the best ceiling painting is of a higher class and higher social status than his peers. So Compositionally, it's very dense. Once again, lots of writhing forms, nude forms, a very dense composition. All of that would have mannerist overtones. And then there are some hints at what will become hallmarks of the Baroque period, particularly an emphasis on emotional expression and vivid uh, light contrast, dark darks, light lights, and vivid colors as well. Again, this is kind of the culmination of Correggio's career as a mural painter, and then that ceiling mural uh, style will be one of the hallmarks of the Baroque period. So the foreshortening is pretty impressive. The way that they kind of soar into the space of the viewer is it's really astounding. That exaggerated foreshortening is not a new idea. You'll remember the illusionistic space created by Andrea Mantegna for the Camera degli Sposi in the Ducal Palace, uh, although Mantegna's version was not nearly so dense, and it has a lot more light in it as well. But there are predecessors for this type of ceiling painting. And then here is a ceiling painting by Vasari, once again, along with Federico Zuccari. It's his Last Judgment mural for the ceiling of the Duomo in Florence. I briefly referred to it earlier, and now you get to see it. And the only reason we get to see it is because of Brunelleschi's fantastic design for the dome, which allowed it to be constructed without internal bracing and support, which left it open so that it could be covered with murals. Here's another Correggio, and we can kind of see a little bit of that Baroque idea of interchanging subject matter. You can paint either pagan or biblical subject matter with an equal sense of care and attention to detail. Uh, it's another image of ecstasy. Uh, it could be spiritual ecstasy or physical ecstasy. In this case, we have Io being seduced by Zeus or Jupiter in the form of a cloud. And I always kind of like this because it's such a strange thing. How do you paint a cloud seducing a woman? And yet Correggio's done it. You can kind of sort of make out a face here, and then you can make out his big cloudy paw sort of wrapped around Io here, and then her face suggests physical pleasure and ecstasy as they are intertwined, and she sits on this cloth. So there's mystery, nudity, sensuality, uh, weird lighting, all of those things that we will see in the Baroque period, but also in Mannerism as well. I got to see this one in person in Vienna, and it's really fantastic. I'll show you a few photos I took. There it is in the Art Museum of Vienna in its frame. It's bigger than you would think. It's about 3 feet tall. And then there's a detail of the figure of Io with that big cloudy paw. I always think of it kind of like a lion's paw. It's what it reminds me of. Appropriate for the king of the gods. And now we will examine some Mannerist traits in portraiture. This is Bronzino's portrait of a young man, and we can see a little less of the weirdness of mannerism, all the eroticism and claustrophobic compositions and elongated forms, but you do see little hints of it. His hands are just a tiny bit elongated, but we do see more of the influence of our northern friends with that photorealistic type of painting. The carvings on the ledge, the book, the carving on the chair, all of that has a flavor of those objects that we have in the northern painters. And there's kind of a poetry of this. We don't know who the sitter is, but Bronzino was also a portrait, and he had a number of his friends who were also poets sit for him. So probably the book there is a book of poetry, and so there's kind of a feeling of something more of erudite poetry, something kind of ethereal and mystical about our sitter. Here's another Bronzino portrait. This is Eleonora of Toledo and her son, Giovanni de' Medici. This is the wife of Cosimo de' Medici, his main patron. And you can see hints of Hans Holbein the Younger here in the treatment of the brocade fabric, which would also be a Mannerist trait, elaborate patterns and rich textures, which we also see in the jewelry. She's a reflection of the patronage that supports Mannerist painting, very wealthy, very aristocratic, and we know that from the elaborate, expensive dress that she wears and her pearls and jewelry. Very closely related to the reflection of the taste of the International Gothic style. Art becomes a status symbol, but also a secular status symbol in this case. I'm sorry the name got cut off of this slide. The artist's name is Sophonisba Anguissola. There had been female artists before the 16th century, and most of them, like many of their male counterparts, were confined to obscurity. Very few artists' names were known at all before the 14th century, but her name we know. She was networked into the arts community and corresponded with a number of artists. And she was a capable painter herself. This is a new type of portrait that we see emerge, kind of an informal, intimate portrait. It's got some intimacy and charm to it. This is a portrait of her uh, sisters and her brother. She tries to capture kind of the childlike nature of her siblings, and so they have these sort of rascally looks on their faces. One of them holds a puppy, another holds a fan. They look like they're up to no good. So they're not always formal, stuffy portraits. Sophonisba Anguissola shows us that portraits can also be fun as well. Here's another example where she paints her family members playing a game of chess. It's, again, a new type of portrait where you can see a real intimacy. These are her family members. She knows them well, and each sitter has their own personality kind of showing through. The youngest one has the biggest smile, and you can almost hear them giggling and laughing as they're playing the chess game. And then at the same time, you can see some stylistic influences in the background there. There's some Leonardo, there's a little Raphael, there's some crispness there as well. Perhaps a little Titian, a little Giorgione in the foreground with the vivid coloring. So it's uh, good to see that a female artist's name has survived and made its way down to us. They don't Female artists have never gotten a fair shake in art history. Here's another, a portrait of her sister Minerva. She was widely regarded during her life, Sophonisba was. She traded drawings with Michelangelo. She was court painter to the King of Spain for 20 years. She made a lot of self portraits too, which was uncommon for artists. It was kind of um, it wasn't a very humble thing to do, and especially for a female artist. But she was very confident and liberated for her time. So she was known for her self portraits, and she's usually playing the spinet when we see her self portrait. Spinet is a kind of piano. And then here's one of those self portraits from Sophonisba. She lived to be 93 years old, died in Palermo in 1625. Uh, Rise in her status is again a testament to the rise of statuses in artists in general. Artists are becoming more and more important, being recognized for their intellect as well as their technical abilities. And I think it's even more significant that female artists are being recognized for this in what has traditionally been a male dominated occupation. And now we'll take a brief look at some examples of Mannerist sculpture. This is a common object for its day. It's a salt cellar. Salt and pepper were usually pretty prized and hard to get. And so they had pretty elaborate ways of keeping them on the table and displaying them. Salt and pepper were status symbols. And so it wasn't surprising that you would have an elaborate way to display them when you had company over. In this case, we have some complex mythological subjects to relate to a salt cellar. These are guardians. We have Poseidon on the right to guard the salt, which comes from the sea. And then on the left, we have the earth goddess Demeter to guard the pepper, which comes from the land. Our artist, Cellini, was a pretty complex person, just like his sculpture was pretty complex. He was uh, he had trouble with the law several times, usually for sexual issues. He also had lawsuits against him, two for murder. He was a priest for a while, and then he renounced his vows. He married the mother of his illegitimate children. So he had a lot of confusion in his life, and he created sculpture that sort of reflects that. But it also reflects some of the ideas of mannerism. There's not a clear message. Things don't look exactly accurate. Here, the figures are assuming some impossible poses. They're leaning way back, and they shouldn't be able to do that without falling off of the salt cellar. The figures are kind of elongated. There's a little bit of that figura serpentinata here, and because they're kind of defying the laws of gravity, there's a sense of uneasiness. This little salt cellar was stolen in July of 2003 and was recovered 3 years later. Uh, but the trident was missing. Its value was $60 million. Here's another view. This photo I took. It's also at the uh, Vienna Art Museum. I can't recall if they eventually did recover Poseidon's trident or that's a reproduction. Uh, the bowl there would be the salt, and the little house there next to Demeter is where you would put the pepper. And this is another angle to show you the awkwardness of those poses. I took a lot of pictures of this thing, so you have to see them all. There's a close-up view of the Pepper House. It's not just gold, it's also covered and inlaid with a lot of jewels and precious stones. Pretty fantastic when you see it in person. And there it is in the room, so you can see kind of how big it is and what the mood is in that museum. It's very dim and cool. It's very quiet in there too. This is also by Cellini. This is his Perseus with the head of Medusa. Perseus with his curved sword, which was a gift from Mercury. Also, his winged sandals were a gift, just like Mercury's, and he has a helmet on with wings, just like Mercury's. Holds aloft Medusa's head, and blood gushes from the neck of Medusa's severed head. And yet, even though it's kind of macabre, it's not treated with a sense of horror or drama. It's just kind of an everyday thing that happens. It's in the Loggia de Lanzi, which is right next to the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, right next to another pretty fantastic Mannerist sculpture, which we will see shortly. Cellini was traditionally trained as a goldsmith, but in this case, he worked bronze. And like Michelangelo, who signed the Pietà in St. Peter's on a strap across the Madonna's bosom, Cellini signed this bronze work on a strap which crosses Perseus's torso. And here's a closer view so you can see all the gnarly gore that flows out of Medusa's neck. I knew you wouldn't want to miss that. This is another Mannerist scene of erotic violence, the abduction of the Sabine woman by Giovanni Bologna. Obviously, he was a master sculptor. He created this work for the sheer purpose of proving that he could. The story here is about a band of men who had hunted for wives among their neighbors, the Sabines, unsuccessfully. They ended up tricking them by inviting them to a party, and then they kidnapped them. It's kind of a classical subject with its roots in Hellenistic Greek sculpture. It's very dramatic. Uh, it's violent, but it's devoid of that deeper spiritual emotion that we find in high Renaissance sculptures like those of Michelangelo and even further back with Donatello. These figures are like actors in a play. There's no sense of genuine emotion. They're just kind of going through the motions of what we have. The composition, though, even though it's three figures, it's kind of dense and it's kind of claustrophobic. They create a spiral. It's carved out of one piece of marble, and they have this sort of elongated, twisting type of contortionist pose, which is a feature that we find not only in Mannerist painting but also Mannerist sculpture. And then here is an alternate view where you can see the Sabine woman's face a little better, and you can see that sense of artificiality, which pervades a lot of mannerism. It's just a little bit phony. It's a little bit synthetic. It's kind of going through the motions without having the deeper spiritual foundation that we find in a lot of works of the High Renaissance. Okay, that's it. Thank you for hanging with me. We'll see you next time.